What's going on YouTube? This is Rybo at the bench, and today I'm doing another head-to-head video. Today kind of going back in the archives, two of the knives that I've had probably the longest, not of any in my collection, but I've had both of these for a fairly long time, many years each. This one I've had longer. I can't even remember when I bought this one, but it's been a long time ago. And this was my daily carry for a long time. And then the Ontario Rat 2 I discovered probably from Nick Shabazz, and that was probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that. So I've had both of these for quite a long time. I really have liked or like both of these knives at some point. And so I was looking around for, making sure that I had done all the head-to-head videos of knives in my current collection. And saw these and I thought, oh, actually these compare, I think, fairly nice and, similar price points. So there you go. All right, so Kershaw Skyline Ontario Rat 2. This is the basic AUS 8 version of the Rat 2. I know that it is available in D2 now, but this is the AUS 8 version, which I have had for a long time. And then this is the Kershaw Skyline, and this is the basic version as well, in 14C28N. I think I've got that right. Yeah, no modifications. I think everything on both of these is stock except for the lanyards that I put on there. So quick recap of what we go through. So pocket clip scales, overall size, height, the width, the weight, kind of how do they carry, ergonomics, ActionDetent, blade, steel, lock system, and the intangibles category, which is just kind of which one do I reach for when I want a knife. Okay, let me get these ready to go, and we'll do our baseline measurements as always. All right, so for the Skyline, you're looking at 2.6 ounces. Both of these fairly lightweight knives. I'm going to guess the Rat's more. Yep, 2.9. So fairly close, but 2.6 versus 2.9. Both about the same size. So the Skyline, I think, is going to have a bigger sharpened length on the blade. So let's say 3.05 inches versus 2.76 or so. And then we'll do in the pocket. So in the pocket, they carry about the same, 4.09 inches on the Ontario Rat, 4.34 on the Skyline. But you'll notice that I'm measuring kind of, highest tip over here to lowest. It's got that, I don't know what you want to call that design. So it doesn't feel, feels closer in size to the Ontario Rat. The Skyline's also going to be a good bit thinner, so 0.4 inches, and I'm going to guess about a half an inch on the Rat. Oh no, it's 0.42. Wow, that's okay. So that's the first thing that is very shocking to me about doing a head-to-head of these knives. Holding both of these, I would definitely think that the Skyline was the thinner one, but it looks like it is just by a hair. It feels a lot thinner than that. All right, let's get into the head-to-head. So I just opened those. I'm going to close them back up because the first thing we're going to do is look at the pocket clips. So we're going to say Skyline on the right and Ontario Rat on the left. Pocket clips, so you have a very similar pocket clip, honestly, on both of these. Not a deep carry, no problem there. These are fairly small knives. But you just have this kind of basic clip that's, there's not a ton to it, especially on the Rat. I mean, that's like the most functional, least aesthetic, just utilitarian clip that you're going to get, really. And on the Skyline, you have something very similar, although I think it's a little bit more, I don't know, not trendy, but looks a little bit better, just a little bit fatter. It's got the big Kershaw on there, which I'm not a huge fan of. Both of these, I think, function fine. They're not really anything special. I'll say my issue with the Ontario Rat is that it's been a little bit stiff in the past. If I have an issue, that's really what it is. The Skyline, if I have an issue, it's that it's not really kind of thick enough under here. So if if I hold these side by side, you've got a lot more space under here for jeans or, you know, whatever pants material. This one is just a little bit more shallow. You do have a ramp, but it's a fairly short ramp there, just not a ton of space to kind of get up. Combine that with the fact that you have not aggressive G10, but you do have some textured G10 here, and you have this very slick material here. I think it's just plastic. Means that this is going to be a little bit easier to get in and out of the pocket, so I'll give the advantage to the Rat 2 there. Scales, so I was just talking about that. So this is an easy, for me at least, advantage to the Kershaw Skyline. You have a nice, you know, not too aggressive, but aggressive enough so that you feel it G10. I prefer slightly more aggressive G10, but this is better, I think, than like the Civivi Backlash, which is another one in my collection. I'm trying to think of others, but you know, this one's not bad. At least you can feel it. It does tend to pick up some dirt and dust and oils and whatnot, but that's just the nature of G10. However, I think it's a nice feel. It gives you some you know, texture to kind of push against. This is just, I've said this before, one of my biggest issues with this knife is that you visually looks like there's a lot of texture going on here, and yet you know, honestly, the texturing is just so small in those small holes there that you're just not really feeling any of that. It just feels very slippery, very smooth. I can kind of feel texture if I really bear down, but it's not that great. All right, overall size. So these are, I mean, this is the same size knife, to be honest. There's a couple small differences. I said before, the Skyline feels a lot thinner than the Ontario. I should do a measurement of the width. So 26.6 millimeters. Let's flip that over. So 1.05 inches, 04 inches. And really, did I get the widest spot? Let's see. Yeah, 1.05, let's say. And then on the Skyline here, you're looking at under an inch. No, I'm sorry. It looks like it gets a little bit bigger over here. So 1.03. But really at the widest point, you're going to be looking at this flipper tab. And if I can get a measurement of that, 1.23. So, I mean, honestly, these are knives that are very close in size. For me, this one disappears in the pocket a lot more. It tucks up against the pocket just because it doesn't have a flipper tab, and it's a very nice shape here. You have more of an angular shape on the Skyline, and it's just really nice slim shape here. So this one slides right up against the pocket. I don't really feel it. This one you do have that flipper tab right there. So that's, you know, not great, but honestly, they're both small. I don't have an issue with either one of them. Ergonomics. All right, so on the Skyline, you have a nice finger choil. This was my first knife to ever really introduce the finger choil to me, and I really liked it. I think that the Skyline is actually very ergonomic, although it doesn't look like it. To me, this knife has always felt very, very good in the hand. You know, likewise, wow, I just failed to deploy. That's terrible, because I love the action on the Rat. The Rat also has a little finger choil here, and one of the things that's kind of commonly said about the Rat is that it's very utilitarian. It doesn't look very nice, but it feels great. And overall, I would agree. I think that, you know, the jimping here, the ramp up where you have that offset blade looks a little funky, but I think it works very nicely. Honestly, the hand works very nicely too. The handle, that's what I meant to say. However, for me at least, a little bit bigger hands. The Skyline just falls into place a lot better. I would prefer some jimping up here, but between being able to feel that nice G10 and that deep finger choil, and honestly, the biggest thing to me that sells the Skyline over the Rat 2 in terms of ergonomics is this little hump right here. When I grab this knife, my finger falls in place right there, and my next finger's here, and honestly, this feels a little bit odd to me. It's a little bit weird that instead of have kind of a curving texture here, or curving shape here, you have this hump. And so it's always felt like this kind of weird, I don't know, it just doesn't, it feels unnatural, I guess, in my hand. I can still get pretty much my whole hand on it. The knife is still fairly comfortable. The Skyline, though, to me, you've got this, which is much more natural for your hand to fall away from that first finger, and that just feels a lot more comfortable to me. So ergonomics advantage goes to the Skyline. All right, where are we? Action and detent. This one's going to be easy as well. This is the Ontario Rat 2 all the way. I mean, the thing that I just brag about this knife is that excellent action. I mean, you have a lot of complexity in there for, you have full liners on both sides, and it's a liner lock. So you have the backspacer, the whatever you call these. I can never remember when I'm actually on video. But anyway, you have these pins here. You have full liners. You have full scales. And you have, obviously the liner lock and everything. So when you take this knife apart, it's fairly complex for a small knife, right? But the action is just incredible. You tend to think, more complexity, more chance for something to go wrong. This thing has been very dependable. I can take it apart, put it back together, and it's very dependable. Lockup is excellent, and it's probably the best example of a well-executed thumb stud that I have ever owned, and it's incredibly cheap. So the Skyline I used to kind of rave about, but that was before I really knew anything. So this is a flipper, unassisted. It is fine, I guess. Most of the time I can get it to, without any wrist flick, but you have to kind of think about it, right? So you have to give it some force. I can fail this pretty easily, and honestly the action is really nothing exciting. Checking my pockets to see, and I don't have it, but the rake is a great example of a flipper that's unassisted, and is the rake P108. Great example of an unassisted flipper that does this a lot better, where it's just much smoother, much more reliable. And so while the Skyline's not terrible, it is not as dependable. Take it apart, put it back together. You really have to fine tune the pivot screw here to get it just right, and then it's probably going to either soften or harden up, kind of depending. But it's fine, but the Rat 2 absolutely kills it. So ActionDetent goes to the Rat. All right, so number 6, the blade. All right, so see, look at that, to make my point for me. Let's see, so first of all, I just want to say I'm not generally a fan of coated blades for a couple reasons. I got it a long time ago because I thought it looked cool on this guy. I wish that I had not. You can see it's held up very well, surprisingly well for such an inexpensive knife. But generally speaking, not a fan of coated blades. This one, I'm also not a huge fan of, kind of this satin stonewash type, not stonewash, but whatever you want to call this. You can also see my grind is way off on there. I think I loaned this to somebody, and I don't know what happened there. But anyway, it shows you I do not carry this knife anymore. So you have a wider blade on the Skyline here. So let's see, 0.88 and 0.81 on the Ontario Rat. You have, I think, nice blades in both, but the Rat 2, for me, just hands down wins this one. It's a full flat grind. Maybe hard to see with a coated blade like that, but just a nice flat grind. Nothing getting in the way there. Thumb screw is kind of off to the side, and no real issues there. This thing is sliced like a dream. I've used it for many years to cut, food, boxes, anything like that. Works just great. The Skyline is okay. You do have, a decent bit of flat grind there, but this is a hollow ground blade, and while it cuts fine, it's not my favorite. Something like the K-Bar Dozier does, I think, a better job of this with a very similar blade design. This one is a much better slicer than the Skyline, and with worse steel. So there you go. All right, the steel, so this one will be a win for the Skyline, 14C28N versus AUS 8. I think objectively, this one is a better steel. I don't really have an issue with AUS 8. I know it's a budget steel, but it's fine in my book. Just have to sharpen it a bunch, but it takes a razor sharp edge. And it doesn't chip, at least in my history. Lock system. So you're looking at a frame lock versus liner lock versus a liner lock. You do have 2 metal liners over here and just 1 over here. And so I think there's probably a case to be made for the Ontario Rat being the stronger lock system. I'm not going to make that case. So for me, I'm going to skip this category because I think these are just about equal. You see a lot of companies now lightening up their knives by doing half liners or doing kind of the integrated liners into the handle. You know, honestly, I think both of these knives are about as strong. You can see that the wear on the Rat, you've got, you know, a much, this guy has really worn in to where it's over 50%, well over 50% when it's locked up. That does make me a bit nervous, just because I've seen aging liner locks and, you know, they're all the way over. This one is aged quite nicely. You know, it's right there. I don't know, what would you say that is? 50%, a little bit, maybe a little bit more. But honestly, I think they're both just fine. They're, yeah, so I'm not going to give any advantage to either lock system. Okay, so that leads us to intangibles. It looks like it doesn't really, I guess it doesn't matter. If I pick the Skyline, then we tie. If I pick the Rat, then it wins. So little history real quick, and then I'll pick the intangibles, and then the winner, I guess, from that. So this was my go-to daily carry knife, you know, a long time ago. I discovered this knife. I thought that it was just a really nice looking knife. I liked the finger choil, loved the G10. Just thought it was kind of a gentleman's daily carry knife. It was something that I didn't think would scare anybody. It just looks kind of nice in all situations. And I have a story on one of my videos, if you go back, talking about my very first Skyline, not Skyline, my very first Kershaw when I was a kid, and that really got me into pocket knives. And so Kershaw, because of that, kind of has a soft space in my heart, even though I'm not a huge fan of the stuff that they do now, but because of that, I really like Kershaw. So this was my daily carry knife for a long time. And then I discovered this knife and pretty much kicked this guy out of the pocket. So intangibles for me is going to go to this guy. And, you know, that is because of a couple things. One, the blade. So again, I've said cutter carry is kind of the theme of my video. The blade on this just cuts much better, full flat grind. It carries, I think, a little bit better, marginally, but it does carry better. More, not more comfortable. It's just more enjoyable for me to use. I think that the jimping offset blade, just the general funkiness of it, you know, I like the way it looks, even though a lot of people say it just looks kind of like a boring knife. It does, but I like it still. And so this guy just kicked the Skyline out of my pocket. So for me, intangibles goes to the Ontario Rat 2, which would give it the win. If you have 30, 40 bucks, I would definitely recommend this, probably in D2 and probably not with coated blade. I may get one without the coated blade at some point, but still a great knife. I think that in general, this one was great when it came out. It hasn't really held up with advances in knife making and kind of being able to produce things at a cheaper cost. This one, I think, has still held up to that. And so that's really, I think, what it comes down to. All right, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.